Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Alina Islam, and I'm a mining analyst here at Red Cloud Securities. I'm very pleased to introduce Snow Lake Lithium to you today, a lithium company focused on advancing its namesake Snow Lake Lithium pegmatite project in Manitoba. For the webinar today, we have with us Frank Wheatley, CEO. Frank will provide an introduction to the company, including an overview of activities currently underway at its Thompson Brothers and Cross River deposits. After the presentation, we'll take your questions live. Please send us your questions via the chat box and we'll get through as many as we can. Before we get started, I do need to mention the fine print. For Snow Lake Lithium, there may be some forward-looking statements made on this webinar. I would direct listeners to the cautionary note on page 2 of the Snow Lake Lithium corporate presentation located on the company's website. For Red Cloud Securities, I would highlight that this webinar is for information purposes only and should not be considered a solicitation to purchase or sell securities or a recommendation to buy or sell securities. We note that this call does not take into account the particular situation or needs of individual investors. Participants should rely on their own investigations and seek their own professional advice before investment. Please see our most recent research located on our website for Snow Lake Lithium specific disclosures. And with that, I'll hand it over to you, Frank. Please take it away.
Good morning. Thank you, Alina. Good morning, everyone. I'm the CEO of Snow Lake Lithium. As Alina mentioned, there's a disclaimer for forward-looking statements. First, an overview. Snow Lake Lithium is a Canadian lithium development company. We are listed on NASDAQ under symbol LITM. We have 2 lithium hard rock projects, which we call the Snow Lake Lithium Project, in the Snow Lake region of northern Manitoba. Investment highlights. Why should one consider Snow Lake? We believe that we have the most advanced 100% owned hard rock lithium project in Manitoba. We have completed our preliminary economic assessment and we're moving into the pre-feasibility study stage of development. Manitoba is a Tier 1 mining jurisdiction, which is also located in the geographical center of North America. Up until this past August, when Sayona's mine came online, Manitoba hosted the only lithium-producing mine in Canada, the Tanco mine. Third point, critical metals. Lithium is a critical metal in both the United States, Canada, Australia, and the European Union. Given the IRA legislation in the USA, Snow Lake will produce an IRA-compliant lithium for the North American battery supply chain. Currently, we have a mineral resource estimate of approximately 8.2 million tons, grading approximately 1% lithium. We have a large land package of almost 60,000 acres that we have only explored about 1 to 2%. We have completed, as I mentioned, our preliminary economic assessment, which validates both the economic potential and the merits of the Snow Lake Lithium Project as a standalone lithium project. We have large numbers, NPV7 of $1.76 billion on a pre-tax basis, as well as a pre-tax IRR of 208% and a 14-month payback. One of the items that was covered in the preliminary economic assessment is DSO, direct shipping ore. This provides a near-term cash flow opportunity to fund initial capital costs of constructing the mill at the Snow Lake project. Potential purchasers of DSO include the Tanco mine, which I mentioned earlier, as well as a variety of Chinese lithium refineries. We believe that Snow Lake is amongst the most undervalued lithium companies on an EV to resource ton basis compared with other lithium explorers and developers. And this next slide illustrates the comparable analysis. You'll see on the left side, Snow Lake. We feel that, again, on an EV to resource ton basis, we are terribly undervalued vis-a-vis other lithium explorers, developers, and certainly amongst the emerging lithium producers. Moving on to Manitoba, I'd like to talk about Manitoba briefly. Manitoba has a very long history of mining as well as lithium mining. I mentioned that the Tanco mine has been in production for the past 50 years. Currently, the Snow Lake region of northern Manitoba is home to Hudbay's Lawler mine and Vale's T3 mine. As I mentioned, Manitoba is the geographical center of North America. There is rail up to Churchill, which provides a gateway to Europe, as well as south in through Manitoba to the U.S. border and access to the U.S. Outside of Winnipeg, there is something called Centerport, which is North America's largest inland port. It has access to air cargo, rail, and truck. Manitoba, like other provinces in Canada and the federal government of Canada, released its critical minerals strategy in July of this past year. Amongst the various pillars supporting this policy are two that I'd like to highlight. One is they're looking to streamline the permitting process to shorten the time it takes to put a new mine into production in Canada. They are also looking to encourage investment in downstream activities, in particular the refining of lithium. One of the advantages of Manitoba, if you look at it through an ESG lens, is 97% of all power is generated through hydroelectric. This map illustrates the location of Manitoba to the United States and up to Churchill, which is the access to Europe. There's three major issues for manufacturers of EVs. Number one, they're looking for a North American source of lithium, which Snow Lake would provide. Number two, they're looking for low transportation costs. In other words, transportation within North America as opposed to importing lithium from offshore. And number three, they're looking to reduce emissions across the entire supply chain from the raw materials all the way through to the OEMs producing the EVs. Significant tailwinds are driven by the Inflation Reduction Act, the IRA in the US. This is the legislation that sets up investment in battery manufacturing as well as EVs, provides a number of tax credits in the US for purchasers of EVs. And as I indicated earlier, Snow Lake will produce an IRA compliant lithium because Canada and the US have a free trade agreement, which is one of the criteria in order to qualify material as IRA compliant. Just moving on to the Snow Lake project in particular, we have a very large land package, 59,587 acres in the Snow Lake region. We have two claim blocks, which you can see on the map. It is a pro-mining community, certainly with Hudbay's mine and Valley's mine. Again, there's almost been a century of historic mining up in the Snow Lake region. A number of companies are currently exploring for a variety of critical minerals, not only lithium, but copper and nickel as well. We do have year-round access to the property. There are a number of lakes, so we can gain access by way of boat and barge, certainly by helicopter, and in the winter, we generally construct ice roads. There is existing infrastructure in the area giving the mining activity. There is a power line across the bottom of the property. We have an airstrip about 8 kilometers north of the property. There's major road access and highway access about 11 kilometers from the property. And rail runs from Thompson all the way down to Winnipeg, about 65 kilometers south of the property. We're fortunate in the sense that we own 100% of the Snow Lake Lithium project. We do not have partners. We do not have joint ventures. As I indicated, there are two deposits, which we call the Thompson Brothers deposit and the Grass River deposit. Thompson Brothers is a vertical tabular-shaped deposit, whereas Grass River consists of 4 separate lithium-enriched pegmatite dikes. In the 2022-2023 field seasons, approximately 25,000 meters of drilling was completed. From that drilling, we completed the mineral resource estimate of 8.2 million tons, grading about 1% lithium. You'll note that about 89% of the mineral resource is included in the measured and indicated categories. Another note on the 25,000 meters of drilling, there's about 6,000 out of that 25,000 meters of drilling that is not included in the resource estimate for the simple reason that the assay labs were slow in providing the results on that 6,000 meters of drilling. So as I later on in the presentation, when I talk about plans for the company, including moving on to a pre-feasibility study, those 6,000 meters will be included in an updated resource mineral estimate. Just some of the highlights of the Snow Lake project. Again, certainly we have excellent dimensions. We have drill tested the deposits along a 1 kilometer strike and to a vertical depth of about a half a kilometer. We're up to 10 meters in true widths. We have very consistent grades. From a mining perspective, we're looking at an initial open pit at Grass River, but ultimately looking at underground mining operations on both Thompson Brothers and Grass River. Again, given we've only scratched the surface of 1 to 2% of the property as far as exploration is concerned, we certainly hope and anticipate that there will be additional lithium resources developed as we continue our exploration program. Preliminary economic assessment, as I indicated, some excellent numbers in the sense of pre-tax NPV of 1.7 billion, a pre-tax IRR of 208% and a 14-month payback. Essentially, what the preliminary economic assessment tells us is this is a project of merit. It does have economic potential and certainly warrants moving on to the next phase of development, which is the pre-feasibility study. Key milestones. This basically shows where we are and what we're planning over the next year to 2 years. Essentially, there's 3 legs to what we're planning to do. 1, we're looking at a winter drill program, and this is designed to test both the extensions and the depth of both deposits. I'm not sure whether I mentioned earlier, but both deposits continue to be open along strike and at depth. Second thing, as I indicated, we're looking at initiating a pre-feasibility study, which will take about 6 months to complete and will include both an updated mineral resource estimate as well as updated operating and capital costs and project economics. The third leg of the program that we're undertaking is environmental baseline data collection. We are already about 1.5 years into our 2-year program of data collection. Again, that will be completed spring, early summer of 2024. With the environmental baseline data complete, we will be in a position to start assembling our environmental impact assessment. And given that the Manitoba government has indicated that they want to streamline permitting, what we intend to do in early 2024 is sit down with the Manitoba government, indicate that we anticipate having our environmental application available for submission late in 2024, and want to make sure that we work with the Manitoba government so that when we have the application prepared and it is submitted at the end of 2024, the government is fully aware of the contents of the application and hopefully will use it as a test case to demonstrate their willingness to streamline the permitting process for new projects. Just like to talk about the EV battery supply chain and lithium refining for a minute, if I may. The EV battery supply chain has 5 parts. Upstream, we have mining, which then moves into refining, moves into production of battery cells, then into the assembly of the battery pack, and ultimately the end use, which is the electric vehicles. At the present time, hard rock lithium mining is dominated by Australia. Brine lithium mining is dominated by Chile, but lithium refining, the second block in that 5-part supply chain, is dominated by China. And this next slide illustrates that rather graphically. If you move down to the second box, the chemical refining box, this chart indicates the percentage of the global EV battery supply chain that China dominates. Now, it only has lithium as well as some other minerals, but you'll notice that China dominates about 44% of global lithium refining capacity. Just turning to Canada briefly and the EV battery supply chain. Mining. Canada's primary source of mining is spodumene. Currently, there's 2 hard rock lithium mines in production, the Tanko mine and the Sayona mine. There's multiple mines in various stages of development. The 3 provinces that are dominating the potential mining for lithium are Manitoba, Ontario, and Quebec. But you turn to the second block of the EV supply chain, refining. Lithium hydroxide is currently the preferred form of lithium for EV battery manufacturing. But at the present time, Canada does not have any lithium refining capacity. there is very limited lithium refining capacity in the United States. Tanco, which is owned by Sinomine out of China, has announced plans to build a lithium hydroxide plant somewhere in Manitoba. LG Energy Solutions is also investigating constructing a lithium hydroxide plant at Centerport. That's the inland port outside of Winnipeg in Manitoba. And there's a number of lithium development companies in both Ontario and Quebec that are also planning lithium refineries. Canada certainly has battery cell and battery pack manufacturers. LG and Stellantis are making a major investment in a battery manufacturing plant. And of course, Canada has the ultimate OEMs, GM, Ford, and Stellantis all have manufacturing facilities in Canada. Just turning briefly to the corporate situation. We're fortunate in the sense we have a fairly tight capital structure. We only have approximately 24 million shares issued and outstanding on a fully diluted basis. Just turning quickly to our board of directors. As you may know, there is a certain amount of chaos about a year ago in the company, and the prior board and prior management was replaced. We have 5 new board members. And myself, I came on board about 3 months ago as the CEO. And Alina, that concludes a brief presentation. Happy to answer any questions that are coming through.
Well, thanks a lot, Frank. That was a great presentation. Just for our viewers, you can type your questions into the chat box at any time. So, Frank, we have a few questions.
Sure.
Can you tell us about the scope of the arrangement with Critical Discoveries? Is it to advance regional targets on the property?
There's a couple of aspects to the arrangement and partnership with Critical Discoveries. Critical Discoveries is a well-known geological project generation group based out of Manitoba. They operate in Manitoba and they operate in Western Ontario. They are sort of twofold. One, they are looking at our property to see what assistance they can provide in expanding our footprint around the Snow Lake project. But more importantly, they're looking at potential project generation in Manitoba, other projects that have lithium potential. Given our primary project is in Manitoba, we're certainly wanting to focus our activities in Manitoba. So bottom line is they are a project generation group, and we are looking to them to generate additional potential lithium projects in Manitoba.
Okay, so are you seeing any more exploration potential on the property itself aside from Gross River and Thompson Brothers?
Yes, as I indicated, it's almost 60,000 acres of property, and we have only explored about 1 to 2%. We will be looking to not only test the extensions of the 2 existing deposits, but do some grassroots exploration over the balance of the property. That will have to be conducted in the summer months, not during the winter when there's snow cover.
Okay. So just on the upcoming drilling campaign, any plans on how big that's going to be?
No, we're in the process of working on that right now. We don't have a target meterage right now. But as I say, the purpose of the program is to test both the extensions along strike and at depth, given both the Grass River and Thompson River deposits are open along strike and at depth.
Okay.
So there is potential to hopefully add additional tons on the existing deposits, as well as any other targets that we may uncover on the balance of the property.
Right. Just on the MOU with Tanco, any progress there?
A number of companies in Manitoba are talking to Tanco. They obviously have processing facilities. I mentioned earlier that one of the aspects of the preliminary economic assessment was DSO, direct shipping ore. And the theory behind DSO for companies like Snow Lake is the revenue that is generated from the DSO essentially offsets and self-funds the capital costs of constructing the mine and the mill at the site. Tanco is a logical choice given it's got processing facilities just outside of Winnipeg. Alternatively, the other processing options for DSO are Chinese refineries. And as I mentioned, we have rail access directly up to Churchill, which would provide shipping access directly to China for DSO.
Okay. What about the PFS? How's work going on that?
We're in the process of initiating that right now. That is a process that should take about 6 months to complete. So again, spring, early summer next year, 2024 is when we anticipate that to be completed.
Okay. So just a question on the PEA. In the mine plan for the PEA, you start off mining at Gross River during the first 2 years, then you move to Thompson Brothers, and then come back to Gross River towards the end of the mine life. Is there a specific reason behind this? Does it have to do with grades of the ore body, or why are you starting at one and moving to the next and coming back?
That is, and that's one of the reasons that we're moving on to the pre-feasibility study. What the pre-feasibility will do is establish a base case and a more comprehensive mine plan, which will take into consideration where do we start an initial open pit. Ultimately, the plan is both deposits will be mined underground using underground mining. So setting out the base case, setting out the sequence of where we use the open pit, where we access the underground, will all be detailed in a much more robust manner in the pre-feasibility study. The PEA has a preliminary mine plan, so those are preliminary ideas. And as I indicated earlier, what the PEA indicates is a project of merit, so does warrant moving on to the next stage of development. That's where you start to develop a much more robust mine plan.
Okay. Can you comment on the relationship with the First Nations? How are they supportive of the project?
We are fortunate in the sense that Manitoba is a pro-mining community, and up in the Snow Lake region, it is also a pro-mining community in the sense that you've got Hudbay and Vale operating mines. Certainly, mining activity provides training and employment opportunities for First Nations. There's about 4 First Nations that are interested in our project, and part of my plans is the consultation and outreach to each of those First Nations. We unfortunately had an aborted visit to one of the communities a couple of weeks ago, but we're in the process of rescheduling that as well. And certainly part of my role is to sit down with Chief and Council and the community members of all of those First Nations, provide them with an update on the project, what our activities are, and what the potential training and employment opportunities are for those First Nations with Snow Lake on a go-forward basis.
All right. So last question here, Frank, and I know you touched on this during the presentation, but could you maybe sum up your upcoming catalysts in the next 6 to 12 months?
Yes, I think, as I mentioned, there's 3 components to what we're doing, which is a winter drill program, number 1. Number 2 is a pre-feasibility study. And number 3 is the environmental baseline. What the environmental baseline will do is set us up to prepare and submit our application for environmental approval by the end of 2024. Moving forward from 2024, if the Manitoba government is true to its critical minerals policy of streamlining permitting, it would be aggressive but not unrealistic to expect that we could receive a permit within a year by the end of 2025, which would then allow us to move into financing and preparation for construction at the end of 2025. Again, that's an aggressive schedule, but certainly not unrealistic given the policies of the Manitoba government.
Okay. Well, that's it for the Q&A portion of the webinar. Frank, thank you so much for taking time to host this webinar with us today. Just as a reminder for our audience, our next webinar will feature Argentina Lithium, and that's on Thursday, November 30th at 9 a.m. Eastern. Thanks for tuning in with us, everyone. Have a great day.